So we got all these products out there. We got the traditional products, the SPIA, and then you got the deferred income annuities. Then you got these variable annuities with these riders. That's pretty much the insurance world for the most part. So how are they used? Well, many retirees rely on advisors. And, of course, how their advisors provide guidance is going to, of course, impact their behavior. Many advisors in this space are focused on investment advice, much more than they are on retirement advice. And they see investment advice as a solution to retirement income. They're also compensated based on a fee under management approach. That is, the more money they are managing, the more money they make. This could either be fee-based or commission-based, but it is money that they make based upon managing your investments. Many lack skill in the retirement decumulation phase. Fixed income annuities or deferred income annuities reduce assets under management. This could lead to inadequate or biased advice. And I think that is a piece that is often not spoken about much, but this is a reality. So people will come to me asking me for advice about or counseling about some advice that has been given to them. And I ask them, has your advisor recommended it all looking at SPIAs or DIAs? And they turn around and they say no. And I say, why? And they'll go back to their advisor, and basically their advisor will say something along the lines like, you're only stuck with the insurance company guarantee. What happens if the insurance company goes out of business? They have low internal rates of return. They have high commissions. There's no liquidity. And they're poor for legacy planning. Some of those are true statements. Some are not. What I'm troubled by is that they're not put on the table. That, I think, is a big issue. Okay. So I want to talk about two different ways of combining investment and insurance strategies. And there are others, but these are the two most common ways of doing it. So Frank had mentioned before the concept of a withdrawal strategy. The most common withdrawal strategy is what's called the 4% rule. Let me know if you've heard of the 4% rule. Okay. The way the 4% rule works, for those who haven't, it actually was developed by, I think his name is Bengen, B-E-N-G-E-N, many, many years ago. And basically the concept is the following. You invest your money in a balanced portfolio, 60-40 equity fixed income. Each year you withdraw, the first year you withdraw 4% of your portfolio. So if you have $100,000, first year you withdraw $4,000. The next year, you withdraw $4,000 plus cost of living. Next year, cost of living again. You keep doing that. Based upon going back to the 1920s, it was established that, and looking at historical returns, that in over 95% of the cases, your money would last at least 30 years. That's the basic concept. Now, people question the 4% now because they say we're living in a different world. Fixed income investments are so much lower. How can you possibly count on the same rates of return? Not that smart. I don't know. Maybe 4% is good. Maybe it's bad. Doesn't really matter. But what has been proposed by some people in the financial advisory community, and there's an excellent paper that you can find in the Journal of Financial Planning that is authored by Wade Pfau, P-F-A-U, very, very bright guy who's done tons of research, is that instead of using fixed income like bonds as the fixed income part of your 60/40 portfolio, you substitute for some of that fixed income a SPIA. Not all of it. So instead of 60% equity, 40% bonds, you would do 60% equity, 20% bonds, 20% SPIA. And what that would do is it improves the probability, and I think it takes it up to close to like a 5% safe withdrawal rate from the 4% safe withdrawal rate, which is really pretty significant. Okay. Why does that happen? Well, simply because that SPIA has in it longevity credits, because people will die, and therefore the effective rate of return of that SPIA, when you count those longevity credits, is to increase the return and therefore improve the probability of success. It's a very interesting study. So that's one avenue where integrating SPIAs really can be very, very effective with investment strategies. Let me see if any other notes here. Okay. The other one kind of alludes to what Frank was talking to before, using DIAs, deferred income annuities or longevity insurance, to basically hedge against living too long. So I like to look at it a little bit differently. I like to think about how can we finance retirement in two stages. One stage basically being living to 85, and another stage being living from 85 on. And so when somebody comes to me and says, you know, I have X dollars and I need it to last 20 years, I'm pretty comfortable doing some sort of calculations. When somebody comes to me and says, I have $100,000 and I need it to last maybe 30 years, maybe 25 years, maybe 34 years, it gets a little bit trickier. So by looking at retirement in two stages and saying, let me fund for the first 20 years based upon investments and Social Security, that's you're basically providing, you're financing your early retirement, those first 20 years, through those two, through the insurance, through investments and Social Security, and after 20 years, using a DIA and Social Security. Simplifies the financing, all the calculations. And, of course, you give something up because you are going to have to, you know, if you die, there'll be less in the legacy if you die before the 85th year. You're 85 years old. However, it is something people can understand if you talk about it long enough with them. Once again, I don't think that, DIAs have hit their stride yet. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think it is, once again, just a great product that just hasn't arrived. Okay. Recent regulations. Okay, so one of the problems with DIAs was that if you did them in retirement plans, they violated what's called the RMD rules, required minimum distribution rules. They claim that you have to start taking money out once you're 70 and a half. So the concept is that the IRS, in order to make sure that this would not be a problem, last July passed finalized a regulation that basically says you can have these DIAs inside qualified plans and inside IRAs, and you will not be in violation of the minimum required distribution rules, even if those DIAs don't pay out anything till you're 85 years old. But in order to get this blessing, there are a couple of rules. Number one, you can't have the longevity age beyond 85. It must be a fixed income life annuity. You can't have a surrender value. So you can't go in after 7 years saying, I'll give you my cash balance back, my cash value back. You can have a joint and survivor provision, which would provide that if, either you or your spouse live to that age, then one of you gets it. And you could also have a return of premium provision. So if you die before 85, something comes back. Of course, the moment you add those extra features, you start to erode the value of the DIA. The beauty of the DIA really is that close to half the people, if you buy it at 65 and it's payable at 85, half of the people in a pure DIA, about half of them, will get nothing. So what happens to that half? It goes not to the insurance company, but it goes to the consumer. So they get double what they would have gotten if they're a survivor. And in getting individuals to understand that is very, very difficult. I'm really not aware of whether the QLAC regs have really done anything to advance the sale of DIAs. I have not heard that it has, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't. Then another thing that the IRS did, not as big a deal, but basically there were some issues with 401k plans that use something called target date funds, that there were some potential issues that they could be discriminatory if the target date funds included deferred annuities, because you would not put a deferred annuity in a target date fund for a young cohort. You would only put it with old cohorts. It wouldn't make sense to put it with the young cohort. And therefore, what would end up happening was if your older people were more highly paid, it could create some sort of a discrimination issue. I think it's a lot to do about nothing, but to me, it is more of a statement by the IRS, along with the QLACs, that they are now focusing on lifetime income. And this is a big deal, that we need regulatory agencies and government to understand that the defined benefit world is ceasing, and we have defined contribution plans, and they need to step up to the plate in a way that they haven't in the past. The Department of Labor has issued proposed regulations that basically would require that employee statements for defined contribution plans illustrate a lifetime income projection. So that in addition to saying your account balance is $8,421, it would say you can expect to receive from this plan a benefit at age 65 of X dollars a month. Now, these are proposed. And you can imagine there's a lot of questions and a lot of controversy with these. What assumptions should be used? Should we be looking at current balances? Should we be projecting balances to retirement age? If we do, what do we assume about the level of future contributions? What do we do about assuming investment returns? Do we look in terms of what kind of guaranteed payments could be made or some kind of predictable payout? There's a lot of issues that would go into really coming up with some sort of uniform approach. And you can imagine there's a lot of people with vested interest in this thing, and I don't know. Anna, you know if they're ever going to come out with final regs, or?
Well, I'm sure they would like to. I don't know whether they will.
Yeah, right.
There's no question that the current staff at both the senior people at both the Treasury and the DOL support more lifetime income, support more risk protection, and trying to improve plans. Also, there's no question that the stakeholder groups are not able to come to the department agreeing about things, and that puts the department in the position of trying to resolve people with conflicting viewpoints. They get conflicting comments. So
Yeah. And interestingly enough, because I think of a sense that maybe this will go nowhere because of the controversy, there have actually been a couple of bills proposed in Congress that would require that employee statements show this kind of information. And by it being a law, the Department of Labor would probably be more obligated to do something. Whereas now they're taking it on their own initiative. There is nothing in the law that requires them to do it.
And if it ends up in legislation rather than the regulations too, the legislation may be wise, or it may have some strange provision that requires something that nobody likes.
Yeah, well, the regulations I've seen, excuse me, the legislations have all been very, very basic. But really, at the end of the day, it is, no matter whether it happens or not, it will be complicated. And if you make it too complicated, the statement, with too much caveats on the statement, saying to the employee, this is based on this assumption, it doesn't really help so much. And people have said, well, maybe we should show 5 different numbers or 7 different approaches. This doesn't help. So it's a great idea. I applaud it, but I just really do recognize it. It's a significant challenge.
I have my solution, but I don't think anybody's going to listen to mine. So.
Well, I'll listen to it after I'm done. Okay. Next is the DOL Proposed Regulations on the conflict of interests. And these are pretty recent. Who's aware of this, out of curiosity? Okay. Well, the DOL tried this once, and then they pulled it back. And what this is all about is, in the DOL's provinces with qualified plans and also IRAs, they decided, the SEC is supposed to do something similar for non-plans. The idea here is to sort of like make sure that individuals who deal within the qualified plan world and IRAs really are getting advice that is in their best interest. Right now, you've got RIAs that are fiduciaries, and then you've got people who work for broker-dealers who are not. They basically live on a suitability standard. And there's concern that individuals have gotten bad advice that has not been in their best interest. And as a result, and I think this really came from Dodd-Frank after the financial crisis, the idea is to tighten up the playing field. Everybody who's providing advice should be a fiduciary, okay? Which means that all have to live to a somewhat higher standard, work in the best interest of the individual. Good thing in theory. There are a couple of problems potentially. One is that this could make it harder for people with small balances to get advice, because now there's more liability, more fiduciary issues, more disclosure, and, you know, some of the big broker-dealers are turning around and saying, well, you know, what this is going to do is alienate our ability to have our people give advice to somebody with small balances. Might be right, might not be, I don't know. Other issue, but, is that the Academy has, and I sit on this lifetime income task force with the Academy, and we're in the process of doing a comment letter to the DOL on this. And we want to make sure that we hope that this addresses more than just investment advice. We want this to address, at least for people over a certain age, retirement planning advice, so that it's not just enough to talk about investments, that for people over a certain age, you need to also be prepared to talk about retirement income and making decisions that are retirement income oriented. And this would also apply to defined benefit plans, that we think it's appropriate that there actually be discussions with defined benefit plan employees who are thinking about taking a lump sum of the potential advantages of taking annuities. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but a lot of what I'm going to lead to is going to be that we have to start looking at the employer and the employer plan as the place to get this stuff done. And when I say this stuff done, it's getting good solutions to individuals. I must have, oh God, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to just like really jump here because I've spoken too long. And so what are the big things that I think are really key? Okay, go back. Retirement, financial literacy. Anna already spoke about that. People don't understand this stuff. They really need to be educated. Where's a good place to be educated? We believe it's at the employer workplace. Okay? That would be a good place to start. And when I mean education, not advice. Understanding different products, understanding risks, understanding this kind of stuff. We also think that we need DC plans to become a lot more lifetime income friendly, which means that they, I'm not going to say required, but are strongly encouraged to provide lifetime income solutions, whether it be offering annuities or some sort of income strategies or some combinations. Right now, there's no reason why employers would do it. All it could do is create fiduciary liability for them. So we would need the Department of Labor to provide something called safe harbor guidelines that would allow them to do certain things that would protect them from getting sued if they followed a certain roadmap. But the employer plan is just really a very good place to get all of this rolling. Lastly, is this issue of whether there is a optimal solution. Is there some combination of insurance and investments that's the best? And the answer is no, there's not. There are competing goals, spending needs and preserving assets. Got to look at individual circumstances. Everything's based upon modeling assumptions. But it is a challenge that represents an area for growing research. And I happen to know, because Anna has told me, that the Society of Actuaries is currently embarking on a study, where they're going to be looking at what we call efficient frontiers. That is, what kind of balance between investments and insurance provide a maximum spending, would allow the maximum spending based upon a fixed or a set desire to maintain assets, preserve assets. I mean, this is the balance that a lot of people have, especially if you have children. You're concerned with that. Then, of course, there's the issue of robo-investing and what the future is for that. Is there a way someday there is going to be some kind of computer program out there that you're going to put in all your stuff, all your needs, all your goals, which kid you like, which kid you don't like, whether you give a crap about this foundation or whatever, and you're going to put in all that stuff and it's going to tell you exactly what to do. I'll be dead, but I don't know if it'll happen or not. Lastly, I'm going to make one final comment. I have a lot of other stuff to say, but one final comment. When people come to me and they say to me, tell me the 3 things I should do. 3 things. That's all you're allowed to tell me about retiring. And I say to them, are you healthy? And they'll say yes, usually. I say, number 1, work as long as you can. Easier said than done. Number 2, delay Social Security to age 70. Okay. Number 3, plan for large medical expenses. Those are my 3 things that I say. I am sorry for taking too much time.